you say stuff they normally wouldn't say anywhere else just because of you people and how they treat them. So thank you very much.
You want to open it up to some questions, maybe? Sure, these guys have, something pertinent to ask.
I was the guy who wasn't on the panel. You just left me a live mic and a podium.
Well, how am I going to shut you up? You're sitting on 6 chairs and you're drunk,
Or on the fucking show. You put a mic in front of me, I'm the guy who talks. What the hell do you want? Absolutely. Does anybody else have a question so I can just shut Pete up from busting my balls for a change this weekend? Go ahead, brother.
Is the movie Boogie Nights anywhere close to what goes on in the industry?
I was really excited about Boogie Nights coming out.
Boogie Nuts is right.
That's the next parody title, right?
I've had conversations with a lot of people about that film, just to interject, and they couldn't believe that you were not in it.
Boogie Nuts.
Bartender. Let's fill that up.
Is he taking it away or are we filling it? That's the only question at the wasteland.
It wasn't taken away.
You gotta refresh it, goddammit. Wait. If that man doesn't come back with alcohol and like, please put it back there. What do you drink? I gotta go up there? Is this a challenge, sir? Because I will accept it.
So anyway, I was very excited about it coming out. Nina Hartley is in the film. I didn't audition for it.
I couldn't believe you weren't in it. I've heard that from 100 people. Why wasn't Ginger in Boogie Nights? I'm like,
I was auditioning at the time. I've had the same agent for a long time.
The guy who made it, Paul Anderson, was Goulardi's son. If you're from Cleveland, that was Goulardi's kid who made that movie. Who made the movie because he watched his dad's porno collection.
Well, that was silly. They didn't call me then, wasn't it?
Actually, I've had 100 fucking people say, why wasn't Ginger in that movie? I said, I don't know. Julianne Moore looked great, but Ginger could have played that role.
That would have been amazing.
That would have been an awesome role, too.
But, from what I saw, I loved the first half of the film. And as soon as it started to get ridiculous and just go off of charts and, good soundtrack. Soundtracked? Wow. I do need another drink.
Hey, give her that drink back so she can at least say soundtrack.
But up till the point where we all know it went off into another direction, it was pretty accurate up to that point.
What do you mean? Didn't certain stars try to become singers, anything like that? They didn't do anything like that?
Yeah, I made a really bad 12-inch CD. In 1986, I actually, in New Jersey, in John Bon Jovi's cousin's studio, and somebody came to me from the adult film industry and said, we want you to do this album. And I said, I can't sing. They said, we don't care. So I took singing lessons and got worse. And I flew to the studio, I flew to New Jersey, I walked in, threw up. I know I did, and I sang, and I really can't sing. I enjoy it, but I can't do it. And so what they did was they had me sing my part, and then I went on the Howard Stern show to promote the 12-inch single. It's called Fantasy World, and they're going, Howard says you sound really good. I'm thinking maybe I can sing, and I listened to it live for the first time on the air. Now what they did was they had a girl come in and do backup vocals. Well, it turns out that when you listen to it, the squeak in the back, that's me. So all of the vocals are...
Yeah, the background girl.
And I know her name is Janice. I have one copy of the 12-inch single left. I don't remember her last name, but she was wonderful. And, they said, the producer was there and he's kicking me because I'm like, don't say anything. And so I'm listening to it and we get done and I couldn't. And I said, you know what, it's not me. I'm in the back squeaking, so I outed myself on the Stern show. I just couldn't pull off the lie. So yes, some of us do try to cross over.
Anyone else? Anyway, go ahead, Rob. We got Rob.
What was it working with Gregory Dark and Jamie Gillis on New Wave Hookers set?
That was the 80s, and there were no, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, well, that was the 80s.
Yeah,
all
that
we
was
need
the 80s.
to
Rob was, or Greg Dark was, he was nice. He was a Dark brother. He definitely was. I remember one night we did go out to dinner, and he didn't eat. He ordered his food and just kind of sat there, and I kind of ate by myself, and we didn't really talk a lot. And So he wasn't the best social person to go out with. And, you know, Jamie was one of my favorite people ever. Just the weirdest guy I've ever met. And stories that I'm going, that's disgusting. Tell me more.
Jamie's actually been a guest.
Yeah, Jamie's here.
Jamie's done the
Right
Wasteland
before he passed away, we had him here.
He was wonderful. I really always enjoyed Jamie. Yeah.
I know he made an impression on a lot of people because he was very honest. I mean, he was not a guy to pull punches, and we did have Jamie Gillis here.
He could really act too. He was a very good actor.
Yeah, he was
Jamie
very
was
good
an
at
actor.
acting as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
What was it like working on Mitchell Brothers production, Grafenberg spot?
You know what? I love the Mitchell Brothers. I used to go down to Cabo San Lucas a lot and go fishing, and I just go down there. But I worked for the Mitchell Brothers, and they were fun. They were wonderful. They made real movies. And when we got done filming during the day, we would go and they would show the what do you call it, the dailies. And so you could go and watch your scenes. And Amber Lynn and I have always gotten along well, been friends. And if you haven't seen the Grafenberg Spot, it's a wonderful, well-made film by Jim and Artie. And we did things like we didn't know were illegal. And well, I mean, we knew it was illegal to film, but it was the Mitchell Brothers, so in San Francisco, you kind of got away with it. And so Amber and I are sitting there, we're in the dark, and there's like 20 people, and we're watching, and all of a sudden the police come in, and yeah, we just did what we thought was right and natural. We both dropped to the floor and crawled out. And you know, I do have stills from the scene that's been edited out, but they were great, they were wonderful. And when I ran into Artie almost every time I went down to Cabo. Artie was just drunk and on the pier. I don't care when I went off, and he was always there. They were fun. They were really fun people. Thank you.
And light firearms. Anyone else?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you for coming back. Thank you for bringing media class and elegance to adult film. And give Debbie Dowling a high five for me.
There we
Thank you.
go. There's more a statement, but I'll
That's
agree with it.
something we did. You did do like 2 or 3 comeback films for VCA back in the 90s, I
I
believe.
came back in 1999. I signed a 3-picture deal with VCA. Now here's a little backtracking to the trial. So when I was asked to testify against all of these people and refused, 5 years later, I was indicted. I was charged with, they tried to charge me with tax evasion. I didn't, just willfully subscribing to a false tax return. But the reason I bring this up, and what this will lead back into it, all of the people, with the exception of 2 that I refused to testify against, were told, if you don't testify against Ginger, it's going to come back around, you'll be next. So I'm watching the people that I refuse to testify against walk up and testify against me, with the exception of 2, Suze Randall and Russ Hampshire, who owns VCA. So, Russ.
Or as we like to call it, the 2 people you still call friends to this day.
Yes, yes. I mean, there's a lot of good people, and you know what? Everybody was scared. I get it. You know,
Oh yeah,
I just made the choices that were right for
terrified
me.
when they,
Yeah, you know, I mean, I
It
know
takes
people.
a bold decision to say no. You know, I'm
I know
not gonna
people
do
that
it.
lost everything that they had. You know, I know one of my friends, her dad ended up in an insane asylum. You know, I'm a convicted felon now. So, but the thing is, I made my own choices, and they were good for me. But when I did my comeback, it was for VCA. Russ made me a wonderful offer. I signed for 3, ended up doing 7, and one of my best decisions as far as the adult film industry. I left when it wasn't right for me, came back when it was good, stayed while I enjoyed it, and then left. And it was wonderful.
Excellent. That's the way. That's the way life should do. I mean, if you're not, you know, if you're into it, fine. If you're not, don't do it.
And let me speak about Russ Hampshire for a minute. He owned VCA, and he's a stand-up guy, and he took a big hit back in the 80s because what they used to do is they'd send agents to trade shows, and they'd go to these overeager salesmen, and they'd make a big order, but they'd make sure it was shipped through something called the red state, where it's illegal, and they'd prosecute. Russ got fined.
They still do that
Yeah.
now,
Well,
like bongs
yeah.
and things like that. That's how
Right.
Tommy
That's how
Chong
Tommy
got
Chong
it.
got hit. Russ got fined $2.5 million. You know how he paid for it? He blew out product for $1.50 in quantity. That's how he got the money to pay for the fine. So Russ was always a stand-up guy. I met him when I worked for Liquidators, and he was always okay in my book, and very cool.
And in this business, there are very few. I mean, I've met a lot. I worked for Rupert Sturman here in Cleveland, and to me, he was a stand-up guy. But there's very few in the adult industry that you can actually say are stand-up people, and I've dealt with them, so I can say that myself. Anyone else got a question? Go ahead, man, in the aisle.
Why do you think so few actors or actresses in the 80s crossed over? When you can think of in the 70s, there's major names that crossed over, and then in the 90s things are more acceptable and people crossed over, but in the 80s, when there really were some household names and pornography, but you and Tracy, I suppose, are the only names that really I can think of.
Christy Canyon is a name that everybody remembers.
Yeah,
There's
but
quite a few.
Christy didn't do the crossover. I love Christy dearly.
Yeah,
because
she hit the video age. And I think it's all the film to video age. You had to hit that time where you hit the cusp where they quit, you know, the end of the video age is where you, or the film age is where you hit, and that made a huge difference in crossover.
It did, and I think one of the reasons that it wasn't, first it was very difficult, you know, people still weren't saying, yeah, I watch porn, you know, it was, you know, everybody did, but they didn't talk about it as much. So that's probably, you know, the main reason. I just forgot the second one. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
That's what I think, is you had to have some film background and a little bit of theater, and then that's what made the crossover people. I personally think it's because once the video age hit and anyone can make an adult film, there were no more adult stars, to be honest with you. You had to just do something outrageous to get your name known, so. Go ahead.
Wait, I do, for 1 second here, I do remember now the second reason. A lot of, it was difficult, but also directors were afraid. I did a film, Stephen Kessler was a director, and it'll come to me, but I was doing the film, and it was right about the time that I was making the decision. It was The Independent with Janine Garofalo, Jerry Stiller, and Ben Stiller, and I made the decision to come back into adult films. But I had already filmed for Stephen the movie was going to come out, and I called him up and I said, you know, I'm thinking of doing another adult movie. The Independent hasn't been released yet. I respect you and don't want to ruin your career. How do you feel about it? And he said to me, Ginger, you know what? There are directors and people in Hollywood and that are always going to have a problem with you. The people that are going to have a problem with you making adult movies will have the same problem if you did it 15 minutes ago or 15 years ago. You do what you need to do, and I hired you because I like you as an actress, and I believe in you. Very few directors would take that stance at that point in time.
Do you think you had to work harder coming out of the adult industry to get any job, you know, non-adult job than anyone else, or do you think that you had your detractors, and if you had the role, you had the role?
Being a household name at that point in time opened a lot of doors for me, but it also closed a lot of doors. You know, there are people who love porn, people who hate porn, and it was like half and half.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you go, you know, the moral majority, we like to call them, which are uptight douchebags who always have problems and buy the most porn.